A male Tyrannosaurus slammed its massive jaws into the flank of a rival, a thunderous collision of muscle and tooth that sent a spray of dirt and shattered vertebrae glittering like stars. And for a heartbeat, the forest held its breath, as if the land itself had stopped to watch which of these two monarchs would bleed first. That opening clash is not merely spectacle, it is the seed of understanding. It is how stories of survival begin, with bodies pressed to the bone, with instincts flaring like lightning, with the whole world reduced to the single, hot iron of now. If you close your eyes and let the image stay, you can feel the thunder of heavy feet, the rank musk of river reed and sweat, the taste of dust on the tongue of wind. In this world, every confrontation, between rivals, between predator and prey, is a condensed drama of stakes and skill, a lesson in geometry, timing, and the cost of being too large for the shelter the earth can offer. They called it a false sun because, for a few raw seconds, it betrayed the sky into thinking there were two suns, a savage, grinning ember that tore the blue in half. Imagine the horizon brightening into a molten eye, a red-hot coin falling slow as a god's decision. When the object first appeared, it was still an enigma, a distant glare, a promise of heat. Then the promise became a verdict. The atmosphere flamed, and for the creatures below, day was replaced by a new, savage day, one that had no place for the habits of millions of years. The sound like a mountain collapsing into a trumpet, the shockwave that ripped through the ground and rearranged rivers. Trees didn't just fall, they exhaled their life in a plume of sap and broken pollen. Heat arrived before understanding, a wall of thermal violence so abrupt that flesh and leaf could scarcely react. For the animals that had evolved under consistent sun, a sun that had timed their breathing and growth, this second star rewrote the laws of weather and survival in an instant. If a disaster came without warning, what would you grab? What would you run toward? A cave, your nearest kin, something you loved, and what would you leave to flame? The creatures of Hell Creek had their own answers, honed into instinct. Some fled inland, some dove. Some, like the tyrant kings and their rivals, could only run as fast as their mass allowed, and in that unforgiving calculus, speed and size are not always friends. Long before the new sun blazed, Hell Creek breathed as an ecosystem in perfect, aching detail. Rivers braided through fern and willow, churning with fish that flashed like quicksilver. Vines hung heavy with fruit. Herds moved in slow, rhythmic tides. The Tyrannosaurus walked its domain with an authority shaped by bone and hunger, not mere domination, but a mutual choreography between apex and landscape. Life was dense, intricate, interlaced with predator tactics and prey strategies that formed a living machine of checks and balances. Imagine a morning in which dew hangs like 1,000 tiny mirrors on the back of a hadrosaur. The herd's ears flicked like tiny sails, processing sound as weather. The tyrant that watched them learned their rhythms, where the calves drifted, how the old specimens lagged, which streams carried the scent of a sundered limb. These patterns were maps. Each sentry and sentinel, each matriarch and scout, performed a role in a choreography that meant survival for many. The sheer wealth of species here, armored ankylosaurs, swift ornithomimids, flocks of feathered hunters, created a safety by numbers and a danger by density. When one species flourished, others adjusted. When one dwindled, new openings appeared.
A massive stampede ensues, a chaotic rush for survival against the setting sun.
We tend to romanticize balance, but balance in Hell Creek was not gentle, it was razor-sharp. Predators learned to read the smallest oddity, a limp, an off-rhythm, the scent of a calving calf. Prey species learned herd strategies, the circling wall of horns, the feint that opened a flank, the communal alarm call that turned a scatter into synchronized escape. This balanced brutality was a product of time, evolution's patient, merciless schooling. There are moments in nature when something inside all creatures registers wrongness. The hush that falls before thunder, the way birds stop singing when a snake slides too near. In Hell Creek, that hush came as a light that was not morning light, a red, uncanny glow that changed shadows into accusations. The world seemed to inhale and hold tight. Leaves ceased their trembling, the calls of mating birds cut off mid-phrase. The Tyrannosaurus, king of all he surveyed, felt it in the deep socket of his bones, a vibration that matched the gravity of fear more than scent. The animals' responses were not sentimental, they were instruction manuals written in muscle. Herds tightened, solitary hunters recalibrated. The small mammal that would later carve its fate underground behaved like a creature with a sixth sense. It stole toward buried refuge not from curiosity, but from an instinct-souled knowledge that the surface can turn traitor. The presentiment did not give them answers, it gave them a fraction of time to act. And in that fraction, the differences between species, between size, speed, behavioral flexibility, were amplified into life and death decisions. Pause here and consider your own presentiments, that tug in the gut that says, we are not safe. How often do we honor it? For the creatures of Hell Creek, ignoring such signals was not an option. They could not consult a map, check a forecast, or call for help. They had only skin, ear, eye, and the deep archive of generations stored in DNA. The presentiment made their instincts sing one true song: move, hide, protect the young, or die. The impact was not a single event, but a cascading collapse. Crust cracked, oceans heaved, and landscapes reorganized with a violence that looked like the planet throwing off an infection. In the coastal fringes, giant waves rose like mountains, then thundered inland, swallowing trees and nests and whole herds. The ground itself became unreliable. Fissures split like the mouths of new rivers, swallowing the unwary. Smoke and dust began their slow, suffocating climb into the sky, turning the air into a viscous throat through which nothing could breathe freely. Amid the chaos, instincts turned to mechanisms for survival. Herd leaders pushed the young toward high ground. Predators abandoned cunning for immediacy. Their strategies reduced to the simplest calculus: feed now or not at all. The Tyrannosaurus that had commanded territory for years found itself bewildered by a terrain that no longer answered to its experience. Paths were gone, landmarks unrecognizable. Hunting strategies that once worked, ambushes, stalking through familiar groves, were suspended by heat and smoke. The animals that remained mobile were the ones that could improvise. Imagine a herd of ceratopsians, horns lowered, stamping like ancient engines, trying to plow through a gale of ash. Imagine a feathered raptor turning aside from a kill to flee because smoke made its feathers sting and its eyes water. Chaos did not discriminate. It rewired the playbook of life. The old rules were burned away, forcing new rules to appear in the raw, unplanned spaces that opened. Then came the rain that no life story had prepared them for, spheres of molten rock and hot iron that rained down, little suns in their own right. These were not mere cinders. They were projectile sentences from the sky, landing with explosive finality. Where they struck, the ground flamed and sap boiled in an instant. The world's surface became a furnace, and the usual avenues of escape closed as ash slicked the ground and smoke clouded the horizon. For an animal on the run, this rain was an unthinkable addition to the already impossible challenge. Running through a forest of falling fire turned the act of flight into a gauntlet. Some animals found shelter in caves or deep burrows. Others were less fortunate, trapped by their own size, by rivers they could not cross, or by the encroaching walls of flame. The common salvation for many small species, burrowing, hiding under litter, slipping between roots, became the thread that separated survival from extinction. Those that could vanish beneath the skin of the earth survived the inferno above. This rain changed the way nature's cruelty looked. It was not targeted, it was categorical. Everything under that burning ceiling was threatened. The precision of a predator's bite had nothing to do with the randomness of falling fire. But the small, the adaptable, the quick to hide, these qualities suddenly trumped the weapons of scale. The very traits that had made tyrants successful in a stable world became liabilities. Size is power until the environment says otherwise. The Tyrannosaurus, that magnificent machine of muscle and bone, confronted the cruel paradox. Mass that had once ensured dominance now slowed the ability to flee, to seek shelter, to adapt. His ribs expanded with heat, lungs burned with air thick with ash. His feet, designed to crush, could not outrun a wall of flame or wedge into fissures. In the end, the king's great roar became an elegy. It is tempting to mythologize the fall of a king as a single tragic moment. The truth was a prolonged, grinding failure of a design optimized for a different world. The tyrant fell not just because of fire, but because the rules had changed faster than his morphology could. His jaws, perfect for dispatching prey, were useless against the atmosphere's new hostility. Even his intelligence, keen in sensing weakness in a herd, could not compensate for the simple physics of heat and weight. This is a moment to reflect. Dominance is contextual. In human terms, what skills or advantages are you leaning on that would be rendered irrelevant if the context shifted overnight? The Tyrannosaurus teaches us that adaptability and redundancy, multiple ways to survive, matter more than absolute strength when unpredictability becomes the environment's new normal. After the roaring, after the conflagration, the world quieted into a silence so complete it felt like a presence. Ash lay thick as a shroud. The horizon grew soft and featureless. Where once life had been loud with birds and calls and the scrape of claws, there was now a hush punctuated only by the occasional tremor underfoot. Life did not end entirely. It retreated and contracted into the silent, secret seams of the earth. Under that frozen canopy of ash, small life went on, muffled but real. Burrowed mammals, insects, small reptiles, and seeds in the soil became the repository of future possibility. The small mammal, the one who had slipped into the mud and behind roots on instinct, survived in the cool of underground chambers. The subterranean world had become a library for life's blueprints, and whether or not those blueprints would translate to the above-ground world again depended on time, patience, and the slow chemistry of recovery. Consider the lesson: silence is not always absence. It can be a reserve. In our own life, times of quiet after calamity can be when the foundations for future growth are laid. The world of the giants may have been silenced, but seeds, spores, and small bodies endured, quietly compass-bearing toward the next chapters. It is worth remembering the richness that was lost, the world that Hell Creek had been in the days and years before the sky fell. This is not sentimental nostalgia, it is architecture of biodiversity. Hell Creek had been a tapestry of niche after niche, wetlands swelling with amphibians, ribbon streams with fish, groves where hadrosaurs grazed like placid mountains, cliffs where raptors nested and trained their young in the art of the hunt. When we reconstruct that world in our minds, we see more than organisms, we see the exchanges. One species' waste was another's feast. The shade of a giant conifer let ferns and moss flourish. Predators kept herbivores in check. Herbivores shaped the vegetation by their grazing. Insect populations were steered by the presence of both. This complexity is not mere decoration, it is functional. Power resides not only in the big bite, but in the way energy moves through systems. Those cycles were violent and beautiful in equal measure. When you picture Hell Creek before the ash, pay attention to the cunning small things. The way a juvenile raptor learned to read the wind, the way a mother triceratops positioned her young against a slope, the way a small mammal stole seeds from beneath a sleeping giant. All of that quiet commerce made an ecosystem both resilient and vulnerable. Resilient because of redundancy, vulnerable because of specialization. The dinosaurs of the late Cretaceous were not mistakes. They were masterpieces of adaptation. Armor plates, fluted teeth, crushing beaks, counterbalancing tails, every morphological quirk was an answer to some puzzle of predation, feeding, or reproduction. The Tyrannosaurus's skull, with its cross-braced bone and shock-absorbing structure, was an engineering marvel. Ankylosaurs carried clubs on their tails like built-in wrecking balls. Hadrosaurs possessed dental batteries capable of shearing tough plant matter. Feathered theropods had evolved finery and insulation that presaged a whole new branch of life. But the apex of adaptation is not only in weapons or size, it is in behavioral complexity. Herd formations, migratory pulses, communal nesting, and teaching behaviors among parents and offspring created cultural envelopes that amplified survival. The small foot soldier of evolution, the mammal that burrowed and nibbled at night, showcased another genius: the ability to exploit niches that giants could not. Evolution is a sprawling anthology of solutions. Celebrate that ingenuity. Study how nature solved problems with combinations of form, behavior, and timing. The artistry of adaptation is a testament to time's patient selection. Yet the very specificity of some adaptations would be revealed as vulnerability when the world's rules were rewritten. Perfection, once defined, can calcify. The Tyrannosaurus's mastery was tailored to its environment, a system of muscles, bones, behaviors optimized to exploit certain resources. But when the environment changed too quickly, those optimizations became rigidities. Gigantism demanded more food, more territory, more stability. Specialization meant less flexibility. When food chains fractured and microclimates collapsed under the weight of fire and dust, these perfected traits became handicaps. This is the central paradox. Evolutionary success breeds the seeds of future risk if it sacrifices flexibility. The more a lineage invests in a narrow suite of skills, the harder it is to retool. Specialists starve when their prey vanishes, giants collapse when resources shrink. But small, generalist creatures with fatter portfolios of behaviors and diets survived by virtue of their modesty. They were not glamorous, but they were resilient. We see this lesson everywhere, in business, in communities, in personal skills. Diversify capacities, Don't let a single identity or ability become the entire scaffolding of your worth. The Tyrannosaurus teaches us the humility of contingency. Even mastery must be married to adaptability. From the ruin rose a new order that did not look like the old one. The winners were rarely the biggest. They were the smallest, the most flexible, the ones who could hide, shift diets, and reproduce quickly. Mammals burrowed and bred in the quiet, insects proliferated in the new niches, plant life adapted to shade and ash. Life that had been peripheral suddenly became central. The world's governance shifted from visible rulers to invisible workers. The end of the dinosaurs was not a failure of evolution. It was the planet changing the rules, a sudden, impartial update to the game code that favored different players. From the ashes sprouted a world that required different tools, subterranean cunning, rapid reproduction, and an unglamorous capacity to take small steps. Those who endured were not the least fit, but the most fit for the new regime. Extinction was not moral judgment. It was a data point in the long, indifferent arithmetic of survival.
I'll never forget the day we found it.
It's a remarkable specimen.
If you enjoyed this journey into an ancient last day and want more stories that blend science, drama, and survival lessons, please subscribe to the channel for regular narratives and reflections. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and join the conversation.